60-year-old American man impregnates 12 women in a remote Himalayan village. Locals call him the gift of the mountain. The first thing Arthur noticed was the silence. Not the absence of sound, but a different kind of silence. A living thing that breathed in the thin Himalayan air. It was the silence of a world without engines, without the electric hum of modern life. Here in the village of Lenpo, nestled in the jagged teeth of the mountains like a lost jewel, the only sounds were the wind whispering through prayer flags, the gentle lowing of yaks, and the soft, rhythmic chanting of the women. 12 women. They sat in a semicircle around him, their pregnant bellies round and taut beneath their homespun chubas. Their faces, weathered by sun and wind, were turned towards him, their dark eyes holding a mixture of reverence and something else, something deeper and more ancient than he could ever hope to understand. He was a strange god in their midst, a 60-year-old American man with thinning gray hair, a paunch he could never quite lose, and a heart full of ghosts. A small girl no older than 5, with cheeks as red as ripe apples, toddled towards him, her bare feet silent on the packed earth floor of the community hall. She pointed a tiny finger at his chest, then at the swelling belly of one of the women, her mother. Her brow furrowed in concentration. "Bubba," she chirped, the word anewly. "Learn treasure on her tongue, father? Is the mountain in you too?" The question, so innocent, so profound, hung in the air. A tiny pebble dropped into the vast, silent pool of his new reality. He looked at the 12 pregnant women, at the faces of the children he had fathered, and the children he was yet to father. The gift of the mountain, they called him, Lenpo's Rinpoche, precious one. He had come here to die, to let the mountains swallow his grief. Instead, they had given him a new one, a life so bizarre, so morally fraught, that it felt more like a fever dream than reality. He was their savior, their stud, their walking, breathing miracle. And as the little girl's question echoed in the sacred silence, Arthur felt the weight of the mountain settle not inside him, but upon him. A crushing, beautiful burden from which he could never escape. Was he a gift, or was he a monster? He no longer knew. The line had blurred somewhere between the first desperate plea and the 12th gentle touch. And now, all he could do was breathe in the thin, holy air and wonder how in God's name he had come to this. 6 months earlier, Arthur's world had been a different kind of quiet. The quiet of an empty house in suburban Ohio, house that still held the ghost of a child's laughter, the faint scent of his wife's perfume. It was the suffocating silence of loss. Dr. Arthur Finch, once a respected pediatrician, was now a hollowed-out man of 60, haunted by the one life he couldn't save, his own daughter, Lily. Lily had been a wisp of a thing with his watery blue eyes and her mother's fierce intelligence. She'd been born with a rare genetic disorder, a cruel twist of fate in their family's DNA. Arthur, the doctor, the man of science, had watched helplessly as his own flesh and blood withered away. He had dedicated his life to healing children, yet he couldn't heal his own. The irony was a bitter pill he swallowed every morning with his coffee. Her death, at the tender age of 7, had been a slow, creeping thief, stealing not just her future, but the future of his marriage as well. His wife Sarah, a woman who had once looked at him with adoration, now saw only a reminder of their shared failure. The house became a mausoleum of unspoken resentments. They moved like ghosts. Around each other, their grief a wall of ice between them. The divorce had been quiet, civil, and utterly devastating. Arthur retired early. He couldn't bear the sight of healthy children anymore, their vibrant lives a constant, painful reminder of what he had lost. He sold his practice and retreated into the sterile silence of his empty home. He was a man adrift, a ship without a rudder, a genetic dead end. He was convinced his lineage was tainted, a carrier of sorrow. He was glad he had no other children. The Finch line, he decided, would end with him. It was the only decent thing to do. He spent his days rereading medical journals, searching for an answer he knew he would never find. He ate frozen dinners in front of the television, the canned laughter of sitcoms, a jarring counterpoint to the silence in his soul. He was a good man, a kind man, but his goodness was a hollow thing, a shell without a core. He was drowning in a sea of what-ifs, and if-onlys. One day, while clearing out Lily's room, he found a small, leather-bound book. It was a collection of his grandfather's travel journals, a man who had been an intrepid explorer in his youth. He had written of a place in the Himalayas, a hidden valley where the people lived in harmony with nature, untouched by the modern world. He called it the roof of the world, a place where the air was so clean it felt like you were breathing starlight. A seed was planted in the barren soil of Arthur's heart, a desperate, irrational idea. He would go there. He would walk until his legs gave out. He would climb until the thin air stole his breath. He would lose himself in the vastness of the mountains, a final pilgrimage to the edge of the world. He wasn't seeking enlightenment. He was seeking oblivion. A place where the silence was not of loss, but of peace. He sold the house, gave away most of his possessions, and bought a one-way ticket to Kathmandu. He left a note for Sarah, a simple, inadequate apology for a lifetime of shared pain, told no one where he was going. Was a ghost, leaving a haunted house, seeking a new place to wander. The journey to Lempo was brutal. A rattling bus ride to the end of the road, followed by weeks of trekking through treacherous mountain passes. He was not a young man, and the altitude sickness hit him hard. He was robbed once by bandits and almost fell to his death from a narrow, icy trail. But he pushed on, driven by a force he didn't understand. It was as if the mountains were calling to him, pulling him towards his destiny. When he finally stumbled into the valley of Lempo, he was a broken man, delirious with fever and exhaustion. He collapsed at the entrance to the village, his last conscious thought, a fleeting image of Lily's smiling face. He had come to the roof of the world to die. He woke to the smell of burning juniper, the soft touch of a woman's hand on his forehead. He was lying on a soft yak-wool blanket in a small, dark room. A woman with a deeply lined face and eyes as dark and ancient as the mountains themselves was tending to him. She spoon-fed him a warm, bitter broth that tasted of herbs and earth. This was Pema, the village matriarch, a woman whose wisdom was as vast as the sky above them. She spoke a dialect he didn't understand, but her touch was a universal language of comfort and care. Learned later that the villagers had found him near death and carried him to her home. Pema, with her knowledge of traditional medicine, had nursed him back to health. As he recovered, he began to learn about Lempo. It was a place frozen in time. The villagers lived a simple communal life, governed by ancient traditions and a deep reverence for the natural world. They were a proud, resilient people, but they were also a people in crisis. The village was dying for generations. A strange affliction had plagued the men of Lempo. They were strong and healthy in every other way, but they were infertile. The birth rate had dwindled to almost nothing. The few children who were born were mostly girls. The village was withering away, its future as bleak as a winter storm. They had prayed to their gods, performed their rituals, but the mountain remained silent. Arthur, with his medical background, was intrigued. He took blood samples from some of the men, using the limited supplies in his first aid kit. He had no microscope, no laboratory, but he could observe. He noticed a peculiar tremor in some of the older men's hands, a slight, almost imperceptible shake. He asked Pema about it, through a young boy who had learned some English from a passing monk years ago. Pema told him it was the curse of the mountain, a punishment for a long-forgotten sin. But Arthur, the man of science, suspected something else. A nutritional deficiency? A genetic anomaly isolated within their small gene pool. He didn't have the resources to find the answer. He began to help the villagers in small ways, using his medical knowledge to treat minor ailments. He delivered a baby, a rare and celebrated event. It was a girl. The villagers looked at him with a newfound respect. He was no longer just a strange outsider. He was a man of healing. One evening, Pema invited him to her home for a special meal. The elders of the village were there, their faces solemn in the flickering light of the butter lamps. After they had eaten, Pema spoke. Her words translated by the young boy. "You are a man of knowledge, Arthurla," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You have a good heart. You have helped us." Arthur nodded, unsure of where this was leading. have seen you," she continued, her dark eyes searching his. "You are strong. You are from a different world. Your blood is different." A knot of unease tightened in Arthur's stomach. "Our village is dying," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "Our men cannot give us children. The mountain has turned its back on us. We are a people on the edge of extinction." She paused, letting the weight of her words fill the small room. "We ask you for a gift," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "A gift of life. We ask you to be the father of our children." Arthur stared at her, his mind reeling. He must have misunderstood. The boy's English was not perfect. He looked at the faces of the elders, their expressions a mixture of desperation and hope. "You want me to sleep with your women?" he stammered, the words feeling alien in his mouth. "Not sleep," Pema corrected gently. "Create. You will be the vessel of our survival, the gift of the mountain. You will give us sons. You will give us daughters. You will give us a future." The audacity of the proposal left him breathless. It was insane. It was immoral. It was a temptation unlike any he had ever known. He, Arthur Finch, the man who believed his own genetic line was a curse, was being asked to be a savior. He was being offered a chance to create life, not just one life, but a whole generation. It was a twisted, terrifying form of redemption. He thought of Lily, of his empty house, of the suffocating silence of his past. He had come here to die, to erase himself from the world. But now he was being offered a chance to live, to become a part of something larger than himself. I can't," he whispered, the words a hollow protest. "I'm an old man. I have a history of genetic problems in my family." Pema smiled, a sad, wise smile. "We are all imperfect, Arthela, but you are here. You are our only hope." He looked at the desperate faces around him, saw the future of a people hanging in the balance, a future that rested on his decision. He felt the weight of their history, their traditions, their very existence. The moral compass he had lived by his entire life was spinning wildly. This was wrong. This was exploitation, or was it survival? Was he a predator or a savior? He felt a strange, exhilarating mix of fear and desire. The desire to be needed. The desire to matter again. The desire to leave something behind other than a legacy of grief. The young boy, sensing his hesitation, spoke up. "My sister," he said, his voice trembling. "She is 18. She has a husband. They have been married for 3 years. They have no children. She cries every night." The boy's words were a dagger to Arthur's heart. He saw Lily's face again, her eyes full of a wisdom beyond her years. He had failed her. He had failed his wife. He had failed himself. Maybe, just maybe, this was his chance to atone. A strange, twisted, beautiful chance to create life from the ashes of his own loss. He took a deep breath, the thin, cold air filling his lungs. I will do it," he said, the words tasting of both sacrilege and salvation. The elders bowed, their heads in gratitude. Pema's eyes filled with tears, and in that moment, Arthur Finch, the broken pediatrician from Ohio, stepped out of his old life and into a new one, a life where the lines between right and wrong, between love and duty, between salvation and damnation were as blurred as the snow-capped peaks in the distance. He had made a choice, and he knew, with a chilling certainty, nothing would ever be the same again. The first woman was named Dolma. She was the young boy's sister, her face a heartbreakingly beautiful canvas of hope and fear. Her husband, a handsome young man, named Tenzin, brought her to Arthur's small hut himself. He stood by the door, his eyes downcast, a silent, stoic witness to his own inadequacy. Arthur's hands trembled as he closed the door. The air in the hut was thick with unspoken emotions. Dolma stood before him, her eyes wide and luminous in the dim light of the butter lamp. She was a child, a woman, a vessel for her people's survival. He felt a surge of shame, of self-loathing. What was he doing? This was a desecration. He was an old man, a stranger, preying on their desperation. He looked at Dolma, at the trust in her eyes, and he saw not a victim but a warrior. She was not being forced. She was making a sacrifice. For her people, a sacrifice far greater than his own. He reached out and took her hand. It was small and calloused from a life of hard work. He led her to the simple bed he had made for himself. There was no passion in their union, no lust. It was a ritual, solemn, sacred act of creation. He was a vessel just as she was, conduit, for a future that was not his own. Afterwards, they lay in silence. He could hear the soft sound of her breathing, the gentle whisper of the wind outside. He felt a strange sense of peace, a quiet rightness that defied all logic, all morality. He had crossed a line he never thought he would cross. But on the other side, he had not found damnation. He had found a strange, unsettling kind of grace. The next woman came a few days later, and then another, and another. Each one was different. There was young Chen, a widow who had lost her husband. In a climbing accident, her grief a quiet, constant presence in her eyes. There was Sonam, a fierce, independent woman who questioned him endlessly about his world. Her curiosity a bright flame in the darkness. There was Lamo, a shy, gentle girl who brought him small gifts of wildflowers and yak cheese. He learned their names, their stories, their hopes, their fears. He became a part of their lives, not just a biological necessity. He ate with their families, played with their children, listened to their stories. He was no longer just Arthula, the outsider. He was Baba Arthur, a father figure, a friend, a confidant. He developed a routine. He would spend his days helping in the village, using his medical skills to treat the sick. His engineering knowledge from his college days to help them build a more efficient irrigation system. He was useful. He was needed. It's a hole in his heart. The one left by Lily's death began to fill with something else. Not joy, not exactly, but purpose. Reason to get up in the morning. The nights were different. The nights were for the women. He never took more than one woman to his bed at a time. It was an unspoken rule, a way of preserving some semblance of intimacy, of respect. He learned the rhythms of their bodies, the language of their touch. He discovered a tenderness in himself he thought had died with his wife. The situation was a moral minefield. He was, in effect, a polygamist, a stud, an old man sleeping with young women. The western part of his brain screamed at him, told him this was wrong, exploitative, a perversion of everything he had ever believed in. But the man who lived in Lenpo, the man who saw the hope in the women's eyes, the man who felt the gratitude of the entire village, told him a different story. He was not a predator. He was a participant in a collective act of survival. He was not exploiting them. He was serving them. And in a strange, twisted way, they were healing him. Months passed. The first signs of his success began to show. Dalma's belly began to swell, then Yangchen's, then Sonam's. A wave of joy, of relief, swept through the village. The women walked with a new sense of pride, their pregnant bodies a symbol of hope, of a future reborn. The men of the village treated him with a strange mixture of reverence and resentment. Tenzin Dolma's husband would sometimes watch him, with a look of quiet fury in his eyes. He had been rendered obsolete, his masculinity a casualty of his own biology. Arthur understood his pain. He tried to talk to him, to befriend him, but Tenzin kept his distance, a silent, brooding presence on the periphery of Arthur's new life. One day, Arthur was helping to repair a roof when he saw Tenzin watching him from below. Their eyes met. For a long moment, there was no gratitude in Tenzin's gaze. There was only a cold, hard challenge. Arthur felt a chill run down his spine. He was a welcome guest in this village, a revered figure, but he was also a threat, disruption to the natural order of things. And he knew with a sudden, sickening clarity that his presence here, his gift, could just as easily become a curse. The tension came to a head during the annual festival of the mountain gods. The village was alive with music and dancing. The air was thick with the smell of incense and roasting barley. Arthur sat with the elders, a place of honor. He watched the pregnant women, his women, dancing in a circle, their movements slow and graceful. Tenzin was there, his face flushed with chang, the local barley beer. He was dancing with a wild, reckless energy, his movements a dance of rage and frustration. Suddenly, he stopped in front of Arthur. The music died down. The entire village went silent. "You," Tenzin spat, his voice slurring with drink and anger. "You call yourself a gift? You are a thief? You have stolen my wife's womb. You have stolen my honor." A gasp went through the crowd. Pema stood. Up her face, a mask of authority. "Tenzin, you are drunk. Go home." "No," Tenzin shouted, pointing a trembling finger at Arthur. "He is the outsider, the foreigner. He sleeps with our women, and we are supposed to thank him? He is not a god. He is just a man. It's an old man." He lunged at Arthur, his fists raised. But before he could reach him, the other men of the village grabbed him, holding him back. Tenzin struggled, his face contorted in a mask of impotent fury. Arthur sat there, his heart pounding in his chest. He saw the truth in Tenzin's words. He was a thief. He had stolen something precious, something that could never be returned. Pema turned to him, her eyes full of a fierce protective light. "Do not listen to him, Arthur. He is a boy lashing out at his own weakness. You are our savior. You are the gift of the mountain." But the words rang hollow in Arthur's ears. He looked at the faces of the villagers, saw the gratitude, the reverence. But he also saw something else in the eyes of the men. He saw a flicker of Tenzin's rage, spark of resentment. He had brought life to Lempo, but he had also brought division. He had healed a wound, but in doing so, he had created a new one. And he knew, with a dawning sense of dread, that the price of their survival might be their unity. But it was a gift that came with a terrible cost. In the weeks that followed the festival, a subtle shift occurred in the village. Tenzin's outburst had cracked the veneer of perfect harmony. The gratitude towards Arthur was still there, a powerful, flowing river, but now it had an undercurrent of something darker, more complex. The men, once deferential, now met his gaze with a guarded watchfulness. The women, his women, seemed to hold him a little tighter, their affection tinged with a new, protective anxiety. The pregnancies progressed. 12 women, a garden of new life blooming in the harshest of climates. Arthur, the doctor, monitored them with a gentle, practiced hand. He felt a paternal connection to these unborn children that was both beautiful and deeply unsettling. They were his, yet they were not. They belonged to the village, to the mountain, to a future he was merely a catalyst for. His relationship with the women deepened beyond the physical. He would spend hours with Yang Chen, the widow, talking about her late husband, sharing stories of their own lost loves. With Sonam, the curious one, he would describe the world beyond the mountains, the oceans, the sprawling cities, the technology that seemed like magic to her. He was careful not to paint it as a paradise. He told her of its loneliness, its noise, its hollow promises. He found himself falling in love not with one woman, but with the composite soul of all 12 of them, with their resilience, their grace, their quiet strength. This was the core of the wrongness, the thing that gnawed at him in the quiet hours before dawn. It wasn't just a clinical arrangement anymore. It was messy, it was emotional. He was building a family, a bizarre, sprawling taboo family, on the foundation of a desperate bargain. He would see Tenzin, watching his wife Dolma, her belly now gloriously round, and the look on the young man's face was a cocktail of love and anguish. Tenzin would gently place his hand on her stomach, feeling the kick of the child that was his in every way but blood. And Arthur would have to look away, the shame of physical weight in his chest. He was a savior who created ghosts. Then the outside world intruded. It came in the form of a young Australian trekker named Josh. A sinewy, sun-bleached man in his late 20s with a GoPro strapped to his chest and an insatiable appetite for the authentic. He had gotten lost, strayed from the main trekking route, and stumbled into Lempo by sheer dumb luck. The villagers were wary, but hospitable. They offered him food and shelter. Josh was ecstatic. He'd found it, the untouched paradise, the Shangri-La of his Instagram dreams. He filmed everything, the prayer flags, the yaks, the wrinkled faces of the elders. And then he saw the women. "Wow, mate," he said to Arthur one afternoon, his camera panning across the village square where several of the pregnant women were weaving. "Fertility festival coming up or something? This place is booming." Arthur's blood ran cold, tried to be vague, to deflect, but Josh was persistent, his journalistic instincts aroused. He had a nose for a story, and he could smell a big one. He started asking questions, his friendly demeanor a thin veil for his relentless curiosity. Why were there so many pregnant women? Where were all the young men? And who was this old American guy who seemed to be at the center of it all? Arthur knew he was a walking, talking time bomb. He pleaded with Josh, appealing to his sense of decency. "This is a private community," he said, his voice low and urgent. "They have unique customs. Please respect their privacy. Don't film them. Don't write about them." Josh just grinned, his eyes gleaming. "Private? Mate, this is incredible. This is a story the world needs to hear. The last village of the Himalayas and its mysterious baby boom. It's gold. I'll be famous." Arthur felt a surge of cold fury. This boy, with his shallow understanding and his hunger for fame, was going to destroy everything. He would paint them as a primitive cult, the women as victims, and Arthur as a lecherous old monster. He would bring the modern world crashing down on them with its judgments, its laws, its sanctimonious morality. Lempo would not survive the scrutiny. It would be turned into a freak show, a tourist trap, a cautionary tale. He went to Pema, his heart heavy with dread. He explained the situation, the threat that Josh represented. The matriarch listened, her face grim, her ancient eyes holding the wisdom of generations. The elders were convened. They sat in a circle, their faces carved with worry. The fate of their world, once again, hung in the balance. They debated for hours in their dialect, their voices a low, urgent hum. Arthur could only watch, a helpless outsider. Saw the fear in their eyes, the desperation. Saw them look at him, their gazes a mixture of trust and expectation. He was their protector, their Rinpoche. They were looking to him to solve this. Finally, Pema turned to him. The young boy translated, his voice trembling. "He cannot leave," Pema said, her voice as cold and hard as the mountain stone. "He has seen our secret. He will tell the world. He will bring ruin upon us." "What are you saying?" asked, a knot of ice forming in his stomach. "There's a ritual," Pema continued, her eyes unwavering. "An ancient one, for those who learn the secrets of the valley and cannot be trusted. A ritual of forgetting." Arthur's mind raced. A ritual of forgetting? What did that mean? A drug? A blow to the head? He thought of the strange bitter herbs Pema grew in her garden. Herbs whose properties he did not fully understand. "The mountain must protect its own," Pema said. "He is a danger to the children, your children." The words hit him like a physical blow. Your children. He looked at Dalma, at Sonam, at Yang Chen. He saw their faces, their swollen bellies, the fragile future they carried within them. He thought of Lily, of his failure to protect her. He would not fail again. He was faced with an impossible choice. Let Josh go and condemn the village to a future of shame and ruin, or participate in something terrible, something unforgivable, to protect. Them, his Western morality, the very foundation of his being, screamed in protest. This was wrong. This was barbaric. This was a violation of every principle he held dear. But then he looked at Pema's face, at the desperate plea in her eyes. He saw the faces of the 12 women who had trusted him with their bodies, with their future. He heard the echo of Tenzin's rage and understood that the village's fragile peace could be shattered by a single blog post, a single photograph. He thought of Josh, with his GoPro and his glib, self-serving ambition. He was not an evil man, he was just careless, a product of a world that valued spectacle over substance, fame over dignity. He would destroy them without a second thought, not out of malice, but out of sheer, callous indifference. The decision tore him apart. It was a choice between two kinds of damnation. The damnation of inaction, of letting the world he had come to love be destroyed, or the damnation of complicity of participating in an act that would stain his soul forever. He took a deep breath, the thin, cold air searing his lungs. He looked at Pema, and he saw not a barbarian, but a queen protecting her kingdom. He saw a fierce, primal love that transcended his own narrow, civilized morality. He made his choice. That night, they invited Josh to a special farewell ceremony. They gave him copious amounts of chang, laced with a potent, tasteless herb from Pema's garden. Arthur sat with him, drank with him, listened to him talk about his plans for his story. A knot of guilt and determination tightening in his gut. Josh drank greedily, laughing, oblivious. His speech began to slur. His eyes grew glassy. He looked at Arthur, a look of confusion on his face. "Mate, I feel it's weird." He slumped forward, his head hitting the table with a dull thud. The men of the village carried him out into the night. Arthur followed, his feet like lead. They took him to a remote cave, high up on the mountainside. Pema was there, waiting for them. She held a small clay bowl filled with a dark, viscous liquid. "This will not harm him," she whispered too. Arthur, her eyes searching his. "It will only wash his memory clean. He will wake up on the trail miles from here. He will not remember Lenpo. He will not remember us. He will not remember you." She offered the bowl to Arthur. "You are the protector of our children. It must be you who gives it to him." He looked at Josh's unconscious face, so young, so full of a life that was about to be rewritten. This was it, the unforgivable act, the moment of ruin. He was about to violate another human being in the most intimate way possible, to steal his memories, to erase a part of his soul. He took the bowl. His hands trembled. He thought of Lily. He thought of the 12 pregnant women. He thought of the unborn children, his children. He tilted the bowl and poured the liquid into Josh's mouth. As he did, he felt something inside him break. The man he used to be, the good doctor from Ohio, the man who believed in the sanctity of the individual, died in that cave. A new man was born, a man who belonged to the mountain, a man who would do anything, to protect his family. He had chosen them. He had chosen this strange, beautiful, terrifying life. And in doing so, he had become a monster, a savior, a king in a kingdom built on a lie. He walked out of the cave and into the cold, starlit night, the weight of his decision a permanent scar on his soul. He had saved them, but he had lost himself. And in the chilling silence of the Himalayas, he wondered if the two were not, in fact, the same thing. The seasons turned. The snows came, blanketing the valley in a pristine, silent white. The children were born. First Dalmas, a healthy boy with Arthur's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair. Tenzin held the child, his face a mixture of awe and sorrow. He named him Norbu, the jewel. Then Yangchen's a girl, then Sonam's another boy. One by one they arrived, a wave of new life washing over the village. 12 children, 7 boys, 5 girls, all healthy, all strong. Arthur was a father 12 times over. He was Baba Arthur to a whole generation. The village was transformed. Silence was gone, replaced by the sound of crying babies, of gurgling, laughter. Hope was a tangible thing, a warmth that filled every home. Arthur's act of transgression, the memory of Josh, a fading, painful ghost, had borne the sweetest fruit. He had bought their future with a piece of his soul. He had decided it was a worthy trade. He found a strange, deep contentment in his new life. He was revered, loved, essential. He would sit in the evenings with a child on his lap, another tugging at his beard, and he would feel a sense of belonging he had never known before. He was the patriarch of this strange, sprawling clan. The women were his partners, his confidants, his family. The jealousy of the men had softened, replaced by a grudging respect. He had given them what they could not, a future. He rarely thought of his old life. Ohio, Sarah, his empty house. They were like a dream from another lifetime. It was real. The smell of yak butter tea, the feel of a child's small hand in his, the sight of the sun setting over the snow-capped peaks. This was home. He believed he had found his redemption. He had turned his genetic curse into a blessing. He had created life from the ashes of his grief. He was the gift of the mountain. He had earned his name. The twist came subtly, not with a bang, but with a whisper. It was a few years later. The children were toddlers now, their laughter echoing through the valley. Arthur was sitting with Pema, watching them play. He had grown old in Lempo, his hair now completely white, his face a map of the mountains he loved. He was asking Pema about the curse, the infertility that had plagued the village for generations. He was still a man of science, and the mystery still intrigued him. "Was it always so, Pema?" he asked. "Did your grandfathers have this problem?" Pema was ancient now, her body frail, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. She looked at him, a strange, enigmatic smile playing on her lips. "The mountain gives and the mountain takes. Arthurla," she said softly. "But what was it? A disease? Something in the water?" Pema reached out and took his hand. Her skin was as thin and dry as parchment. "Gosh, we are a people of the mountain," she said, her voice a low, confidential whisper. "The mountain is our mother, our father. It teaches us how to survive." She paused, her gaze distant, as if looking back. "Through the long corridors of time, long ago, our men were too strong," she said, choosing her words carefully. "They fought. They made war with other villages. They took what was not theirs. The bloodline was too hot, too aggressive. The village was destroying itself from within." Arthur listened, confused. What did this have to do with infertility? "The women of Lempo, my grandmother's grandmother, they prayed to the mountain for a solution," Pema continued. "And the mountain showed them a secret. It's an herb, a special root that grows only in the highest, most inaccessible cliffs." She looked at him, her eyes locking onto his, demanding his understanding. "An herb that cools the blood. That makes the men gentle, peaceful." She squeezed his hand. "And infertile." Arthur stared at her, the world tilting on its axis. He felt the blood drain from his face. What are you saying?" "It is not a curse, Arthurla," Pema said, her voice barely audible. "It is a choice. A choice made by the mothers of Lempo generations ago to ensure our survival. To create a world of peace, we control the bloodline. Keep the peace. The men drink it in their tea every day. Do not know. They believe they are cursed. It is a kinder truth for them to bear." The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. With a sickening finality, the tremor in the older men's hands, the lack of aggression, the infertility. It wasn't a disease. It was a design. Centuries-old system of social engineering controlled by the women. He looked at Pema, at this tiny, frail woman, and he saw the face of a master strategist, a queen who had played a long, patient game for the survival of her people. "But then, why me?" he stammered, his mind reeling. Pema's smile was sad, but triumphant. "Even a peaceful river can run dry. We need new water from time to time, new blood, strong blood from outside the valley. Every few generations, when the need is great, the mountain sends us a gift, a tool, a stud bull brought in to service the herd." His entire reality shattered. He was not a savior. He had not redeemed himself. He had been used. He was a pawn in a game he didn't even know he was playing. It's a grand moral dilemma. It's an agonizing choice. It's a profound sense of purpose. It was all a lie, a carefully constructed illusion to secure his cooperation. He looked out at the children playing, his children, his beautiful, healthy, blue-eyed children. They were a testament not to his redemption, but to his gullibility. He saw Tenzin lifting his son, Norbu, onto his shoulders, a look of pure, uncomplicated love on his face. Tenzin's infertility wasn't a failure of his body. It was a sacrifice he didn't even know he was making for the good of the village. Arthur felt a wave of nausea. He had been so arrogant, so full of his Western ego, seeing himself as the central figure in their drama. He was nothing but a biological instrument, temporary solution to a practical problem. He thought of Josh, the unforgivable act he had committed to protect this fragile society, fragile They were as strong and as ruthless as the mountains themselves. They had survived for centuries through a breathtaking act of manipulation and control. He had sacrificed his own morality to protect a system far more complex and morally ambiguous than he could ever have imagined. Was it evil, or was it a form of genius? A radical solution to the eternal problem of male aggression? He didn't know. The lines between right and wrong, victim and perpetrator, savior and fool, had dissolved into an impenetrable fog. Pema watched him, her eyes full of a strange, compassionate wisdom. She knew what she had done. She knew what she had revealed. She was giving him a final gift. The truth. Terrible, liberating truth. He didn't get angry. The emotion that washed over him was something far more profound. Kind of awe. A humbling, ego-crushing awe at the sheer, brutal, beautiful complexity of human survival. He had come to the Himalayas seeking oblivion, a place to disappear, and he had. The man named Arthur Finch was gone, and his place was the gift of the mountain. A legend, a myth, a biological function, a father, a fool, a king in a kingdom of his own magnificent delusion. He looked at Pema, and slowly he began to laugh. It was a hollow, broken sound at first. Then it grew louder, echoing through the thin, cold air. It was the laughter of a man who had lost everything, only to realize he had never had it in the first place. Pema smiled and patted his hand. The children stopped playing and looked at him, their faces full of innocent curiosity. His children. The children of the mountain. They were his only truth, his only anchor in this vast, beautiful lie. And as he looked at their faces, at the legacy he had unwittingly created, a single, haunting thought settled in his mind. As clear and as cold as the Himalayan sky, he was their gift, their tool, their beloved king. And he knew, with a certainty that transcended all morality, that a beautiful lie could feel more like home than any truth he had ever known. He would stay. He would play his part. He would be their precious one, their walking miracle. He would live out his days in the warm embrace of their magnificent, terrifying deception, forever a prisoner of the paradise he had been sent to save. He had found his peace. The price was simply his soul, and in the end, he wasn't even sure it had been his to sell.